Hello and welcome to the In the Moment magazine podcast. I'm Sarah Orme and today I'm joined by editor and writer Hannah Bellis, who cut sugar out of her diet and has written a lovely feature about it, which you can find in issue 8 of In the Moment. So, Hannah, what made you decide to cut sugar out of your diet?
It was a really hard decision for me because I love sugar and I've always found that it's a great mood booster, as everyone thinks, of course. So the only reason I really came to it was because I'd had this problem with my skin and these funny red dots that had appeared and just slowly travelling all over my face. It was quite a bad rash, really. I've always prided myself on having good skin and I don't wear makeup because I've always thought, let my vitality shine through. You know, it's a good indicator of your health, I think, your skin. So this was really bad, this red rash on my face. I was so aware of it. I went to see the doctor and he said that he thought that it was this condition called seborrheic dermatitis, and it's basically where your body is reacting to a bacteria that is always on your skin. And the fact that I was showing this to this normal everyday bacteria showed that something was out of whack in my body. And he suggested that it could be sugar. He asked me how much sugar I had a week. And I told him 5. You know, you stop to think.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I have it about 5 times a week, which was really, it was a whole lot more than that. Which is, again, why I thought it's worth trying to eliminate it and see how that can benefit my skin. But it was a huge deal because I did feel that I thrived on sugar. I'm not a person to eliminate things from my diet. I've never been dairy-free or gluten-free, and food is a big passion for me, really. So I was cautious about doing it, but I felt I had to do it to see if I could improve my skin.
Okay, so did you do much research before you cut sugar out of your diet?
I knew a little about the sort of supposed benefits, and because I studied science, I am a microbiologist by profession, so I did science all at A-levels. I knew about some of the symptoms, the effects that sugar can have on your body. But I don't think that I think as humans, we don't always take to heart things like that until it affects us. Because I was eating sugar all the time and I was like, oh, I'm fine. But in fact, if you look behind the scenes at what it does, I think the main thing I knew about sugar was, its role in energy. Yes. And I was like, oh, I need that. And carbohydrate is all broken down into sugar anyway. So I was thinking, no, I'm going to stick with it. It's fine. But it's only when you start thinking about the other effects that it has on the body that maybe it becomes a little less savoury. But it's not until you do it yourself.
So you kind of needed that little sort of wake-up call thing from the doctor saying, maybe you should try cutting this back.
Yes. And even then I was sceptical. I was sceptical that something which I felt was so harmless in my diet and such a sort of cornerstone of the energy that we need, I was sceptical that it could be that. But I thought, well, I've taken the trouble to see the doctor. This is what he thinks. This is what I'm going to try. So I did embrace it. When he said it could be that, I thought the only way to prove him wrong in a way is to totally go for it and eliminate it. So, yeah, that's what I did.
Okay, so how did you go about cutting it out? Did you go completely cold turkey or did you just gradually reduce the amount that you were eating?
No, I went completely cold turkey. So
very brave.
Well, in a way, and what I know now is that is really the only way to do it because of the cycle of sugar. Because when you have it, the way it affects your blood sugar, it comes up and then goes down. And that dip is what makes you want more sugar.
So you're feeling a bit low and you're like, oh, I need some more sugar. And then you end up eating like another biscuit.
It's so easy to do that.
Yes.
And we all reach for the sugar for that quick reward. And our bodies know that will help, that sugar makes us feel good because it does. I mean, that is the problem. And in fact, when I was preparing for this article, I spoke to nutritionist Angelique Panagos, and she was telling me about the effect that sugar has on the brain. And sugar stimulates the opiate and dopamine receptors in the brain. And so it gives you this feeling of calm and pleasure as well as the energy. But this is why eating sweet things can make us so happy. But the problem is, as adults, our brains are smart enough to recognise that it's sugar that does this. So it's almost like our intelligent brains think, oh, yes, I'll have some sugar. That will be the pick-me-up. That will be what I'll enjoy. And in a way that children don't have. Children just eat to nourish themselves. But as adults, we can get this addiction to sugar that's linked to particular products. So we all kind of have our favourites that we reach for. I have this thing with cinnamon buns and pastries. That's what I always want.
Well, they are good. I don't blame you.
People talk about being chocoholics as well, whereas in fact that's the sugar in the chocolate. But that particular person is just identifying their brain wants the chocolate. So that's what they go to.
Do you think perhaps there's a bit of a problem as well that we associate sugar with comfort as well?
It is that indulgent childhood warming treat, isn't it? It's a reward. Sugar in dessert is a reward in a way that many other foods aren't. So yes, I think there is something inherently comforting and satisfying about it. And it does produce in your brain this feeling of pleasure.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how you actually gave up the sugar. So what side effects did you notice when you first started cutting it out?
Well, because I did it so abruptly, I kind of got that withdrawal straight away. And I think that anyone who has any amount of sugar will see this. And really, it's the first 36 hours I found. And I am a very positive person by nature. But probably after about 12 hours, I was just so down. And it was really the mood impact that it had on me. I got so down and everything, any little problem would send me spiralling down into this kind of, terrible negative state, which is so unlike me. But I have always had quite a high sugar diet. And I think it is a normal withdrawal side effect. You get quite down, and some of the symptoms I had were a bit like sort of PMT, flu-y symptoms as well. A bit achy, a bit shivery, but just mostly just incredibly negative. But, it only lasts for a couple of days, like 2 to 3 days. And then I think the body just stabilises itself. And that's when you start to see you're kind of off the sugar cycle then. And what I like to think of as your normal moods, so not influenced by this external factor. And I was not, after I'd gone through this first 36 hours, it got a whole lot easier. So once you've done that crunch, and it is hard to get through because of the way that, our bodies are trained to enjoy sugar. It's a pleasurable thing. Once you get through those first 36 hours, it's a short-term period and the benefits to your body are really, really strong.
Okay, so what kind of benefits did you notice in terms of your health?
My skin did improve. That was really the big one. That's why I had gone down this path. Also my weight, though. I lost about 4 kilos. This was over the kind of 3-4 months. And I had not been hungry. I had not been what you would traditionally think of as good. I'd eaten an awful lot of cheese and loads of toast and butter and loads of big bowls of pasta, the stuff that perhaps traditionally, if you're trying to lose weight, you would not go for. And so I did it all without ever really feeling hungry or denied. And the weight loss was almost a side effect of trying to clear my skin, but a very happy one.
Okay, so how did you adapt your diet then to factor in the removal of sugar? So did you have to do things like making your own cereal or changing recipes that you use?
I did change my diet. So I stopped eating cereal. That was one of the big things. I wasn't eating sort of really refined breakfast cereals, but I would have cereal with dried fruit, like muesli. Still what you would think of as quite healthy. But actually, if you look at the sugar in stuff like that, instead I was having, say, a bowl of porridge that I made. And rather than adding fruit to that, because I think that fruit does count as sugar in the same way that refined sugars do, I would add some chia seeds and some nuts. So it wasn't a massive step for me because I cook a lot of my own foods anyway. I found it relatively straightforward.
Yeah, because it's a bit harder, isn't it, if you're buying things like pasta sauces and that kind of thing. They can have a lot of hidden sugar in them.
They do. They have an exceptional amount. They have added sugar. It's not just, say, the sweet tomato. They will always have sugar in to bring out the flavours. So I think if you are eating processed food, it's a whole lot harder, yes.
Yeah, because that's something I've noticed, because I used to buy, a pasta sauce in a jar, but I've started making my own and using tinned tomatoes and that sort of thing. And now when I try shop-bought ones, they actually taste to me very sweet. And I think maybe our palates get accustomed to it.
Totally. Our palates get totally accustomed to it. And if you do eliminate sugar from your diet and then have some, it tastes almost too sweet. But also I found that my other tastes, I found that food was tasting a lot more. I felt like I was a lot more aware of other flavours in the food besides sugar. And that's something I spoke to Claire Wright as part of the feature research as well. She's a blogger at Raising Sugar-Free Kids. And she was saying, she and her husband did this 6 weeks cut sugar out of your diet. And they saw the flavours of other food, they said, that came through so much more strongly. So it's not just that you lose your taste for sugar, it's you start to taste more flavours as well.
We'd just like to interrupt the podcast for a quick service announcement. We've got some very special offers if you'd like to subscribe to the print edition of the magazine. If you subscribe in the UK by direct debit, you can get 5 issues for just £5, which then goes up to £29.49 for every 6 issues, which is an absolute bargain. And you can claim your offer by going to www.buysubscriptions.com/itpod18. So that's ITPOD18, and you can find the link to that in our show notes. We've got some other great offers for overseas listeners as well, so please check out, again, the link in the show notes and you can find all of the details there. Back to the show. Did you find that there were any particular temptations that made it hard for you to stick to the diet?
There were a couple of instances where I did succumb.
You fell off the wagon.
And the real one that was a problem for me was I had a work colleague who came in with this chocolate cake, this amazing patisserie shop chocolate cake, and it was beautiful. She had left. She came in to have cake with us, and I'd not been bothered at all when there was cake in the office, but it was so beautiful and it was such an occasion that I wanted to join in. So I had this slice of chocolate cake, and it was quite nice at the time. And it did taste sweet, but not sweetly, not crazily so. But it did leave me feeling pretty wretched afterwards. And I think you kind of lose your tolerance for sugar in the same way that maybe you do with caffeine and other things. And alcohol, that's the classic, isn't it? If you're not drinking a few sips and you're completely smashed. This sugar just absolutely sent me into a crazy slump in the afternoon. I felt sick, I felt headachy. It was such a mistake.
So in an office, do you find it quite hard then to avoid sugar?
I think colleagues are terrible, and they're kind as well, aren't they? People bring in biscuits and treats, especially for birthdays and occasions. And it's kind of part of the community, and I think that's a real problem, not just for sugar, but for all kinds of things. Alcohol's another one. If you're out drinking, you don't want to not join in, do you?
No, it's quite hard to say no and just go, I'll just have a tonic water or some juice or something. It's quite hard to be the person who says, no, I'm not going to have that Prosecco.
It makes you an outsider, which no one wants to be, do they? But I mean, I'm quite lucky because lots of my colleagues have been gluten-free or they've had special diets before. So there really was no reason for me to feel I had to have that cake. But I'm quite greedy. I just wanted it. I did.
So how have you been doing since then, since you kicked out the sugar. Have you managed to stick to it?
I did it very strictly for 4 months, and then I had a 40th. It was my 40th birthday, and I'd always said to myself that I would allow myself some leeway around my 40th because of that very same thing. I wanted to be able to have cake to celebrate. It felt like such an occasion. And then Christmas came very hot on its heels. And the problem with sugar, and I should have known this because I'd been through it all once before, the problem with sugar is once you start having it in your diet again, you're back on the cycle. You want more, and you're sort of almost retraining your body to have more sugar. So do I regret it? I don't know. I did enjoy having cake for my 40th and Christmas pudding. And the real problem that I had was around Christmas with sort of the tin of chocolates, because that's so easy.
Yeah.
Have a chocolate, have another one 10 minutes later. So no, I have been tempted off it, but I think for a happier me in the long term, and to avoid those afternoon slumps, which have always been a problem for me, and I've always combated it with coffee and cake, which is terrible. But when I was not having sugar, it was not an issue at all. So I could have my lunch and then just go through to dinner. I might have a snack of a few nuts, something like that. It's once you've done it and you can see the benefits it have on you, I think it will always have a lure to avoid sugar. In the longer term, I don't know how healthy it is not to have fruit in my diet at all. That was something from my doctor, said cut it out. I may experiment with still having some fruit sugars in my diet, but keep that a bit more under control.
Yeah, because they have fruits and they have different GI levels as well, don't they? So you can have one that's like high GI, like a lot of berries are very sugary, but there are other fruits which are better, aren't there?
There are. And I mean, I think so much of GI carries through into sort of a sugar-free diet. If you choose sort of wholemeal products, wholemeal carbs, it's a lot better than the white carbs. And that's a pretty easy swap for most people, I think, as well. I have wholemeal pasta now rather than white pasta as a standard, and I don't notice a difference at all.
What other substitutions would you recommend for people who want to try this diet?
I think the main thing that I found useful was nuts. Lots of nuts for snacking on rather than sweet treats. And that's, you can eat a lot of nuts. And I found bread and butter very useful because it still feels quite indulgent. But, as far as sugars go, if you're eating the right bread, butter is fine. And I think that's key. Feed yourself. If you're taking sugar out of your diet, make sure there are healthy snacks like that still... Oh, almond butter. I should mention that as well. Almond butter is fantastic for a treat. If you can have things like that still feel indulgent and you're not depriving yourself, especially in those first few days when you're feeling miserable, you need to top up your diet because it can be such a bleak time otherwise. But it's a very short-lived, and the benefits in the long term really make it worthwhile going through that.
So since you've been doing this, do you now find that it's easier just to say, no, I don't want to have that?
People, you find it coming from yourself, yes. Most of the time, of course, I'm speaking from someone who has been off the wagon. But if people around you know that you're doing it, they will be more respectful. And if they're not, I don't think that says a great thing about like your relationship with them.
Well, maybe just ditch them.
Well,
get better friends.
Maybe have your own tin of nuts on standby. If they're pushing you to have a chocolate biscuit, you'll go, no, why don't we all have some lovely Brazil nuts or something like that? I don't know how practical that is, but certainly my colleagues in the office, which is where is my prime temptation spot, they were very supportive.
Oh, that's really good. Is there anything else that you think people ought to know?
I would encourage everyone to try it and not to be downhearted in those first 36 hours, because once you've tried it and once you've got through that, it's really quite easy. And in the longer term, it's only a good thing for your health. So yeah, invest a little time and a little nut butter and because almond butter is quite expensive. But yeah, it's a great investment, and it's something that I will be doing with, I imagine, varying success. I'm sure there'll be times when I'm tempted again, but I hope that it will be something it will have changed my life, I think, for the better.
Wow, that's good. Thank you, Hannah, for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.
You can follow Hannah. She has an Instagram account. It's @supperhands, and you can see all Hannah's foodie activities on there. You can also check out our website to find some more sugar-free recipes, and we'll have some links which are in the show notes. Otherwise, head over to www.calmmoment.com. Thank you, and we'll be back again very soon.